Pantera is without a doubt a band that needs no introduction. Their rise to fame was certainly meteoric, but unfortunately their end was anticlimactic to say the least. The band was marred by internal turmoil, substance abuse issues, and a series of different controversies, with many fans wondering if there would ever be a reunion. At this point, it seems impossible for that to occur, seeing as there are now only 2 living members of Pantera. Today we're going to look briefly at how Pantera got their start and their eventual end. It's hard for fans not to wonder what Pantera would have gone on to create had they stayed together, while obviously being thankful for the music that we got during their heyday. So sit back, relax, and let's take a look at Pantera. If you could be so kind before we begin to hit that subscribe button with notifications on for more deep dive videos and breaking news and updates about your favorite rock musicians. When Pantera first got their start, they weren't called Pantera at all. In fact, they were named Gemini. Then they decided to change their name to Eternity, and they eventually went with Pantera as their third choice. Of course, it's hard to imagine them being called anything else now. The group would be founded in Arlington, Texas back in 1981, originally consisting of Vinnie Paul on the drums,
Vinnie Paul from Pantera, Skid Masher, Trash!
Dimebag Darrell on lead guitar,
Hey, I'm Don Darrell at lead guitar.
Terry Glaze on rhythm, and 2 unofficial members, lead vocalist Donnie Hart and bassist Tommy Bradford. Early on, there was some shuffling of the membership of the band, with Hart leaving the group and Glaze shifting over to become the lead vocalist. Glaze was playing rhythm guitar around that time, but eventually dropped the guitar altogether, with Dimebag Darrell being the sole lead guitarist. Within the same year, there was another member change, with Bradford leaving the bass and Rex Brown then entering the band. He went by the pseudonym at the time, Rex Rocker. Pantera would release their debut album called Metal Magic on June 10, 1983, under their own label, Metal Magic Recordings. The style of the album was something along the lines of Kiss and Van Halen crossing over, and was much different than the groove metal sound they would later popularize. The album credited the personnel under the names of Terry Glaze on vocals, Diamond Darrell on the guitar, Rex Rocker on bass, and Vinnie Paul on the drums, featuring songs like Ride My Rocket, I'll Be Alright, Tell Me If You Want It, Latest Lover, and Biggest Part of Me. You get the idea, very much a Kiss-style theme. The album received numerous negative reviews, and Pantera would eventually later on abandon their glam metal sound. Pantera's formative years took place during the thrash boom of the 1980s, with albums like Master of Puppets, Rain and Blood, and Among the Living by Anthrax having a big influence on the group's evolving sound. As the band continued their evolution, their vocalist Terry Glaze failed to adapt, so the band sought out on a search for a new frontman. It was around the time of 1986 and 1987 where Pantera was trying out several vocalists for the band. They played a couple of shows with a person named Matt Lamore, who performed with them in Los Angeles. They were reportedly disappointed in his ability to hit the high notes they needed him to, and they tried out a few other singers. Eventually, a man by the name of Philip Anselmo down in New Orleans heard that the group was looking for a vocalist. Several months would go by and they invited him up to audition for the band. Then, 18 years old, Anselmo was hired on the spot to join Pantera. The year 1988 would see Pantera releasing their 4th studio album, and their first with new vocalist Phil Anselmo. The album was called Power Metal, though it sounded very little like a power metal record. Instead, it combined a mixture of thrash, glam, and sometimes both of the styles in one song. After the album was released, though, the members of Pantera had an internal dialogue about whether or not they should continue with their glam metal sound. The band would perform on stage during this era wearing spandex and the typical things you would see from a glam metal band in the 80s. Vinnie Paul reportedly stated during a band meeting, quote, "These magic clothes don't play music, we do. Let's just go out there and be comfortable. Jeans, t-shirt, whatever, and see where it goes." This conversation between the bandmates was a pivotal shift towards what people think of now when they hear the word Pantera, and it's hard to imagine had they not decided to switch things up that they would have become as big as they eventually did. The group was unapologetically themselves. They weren't afraid of what anyone thought of them, and they certainly didn't conform to any of the stylistic trends at the time, whether it was the glam style that they moved away from or the superstardom that grunge was going through at the time. And it would have been very easy for Pantera to adapt and shift in more of a grunge style, but they opted not to do that. Instead, they kicked everyone in the ass with their album Cowboys from Hell, which is one of the greatest metal albums of all time. But that record almost didn't happen, believe it or not, because a then relatively unknown Pantera had just released their fourth album, Power Metal, with their new vocalist Phil Anselmo, and it wasn't received very well at the time. With the band feeling less confident than ever, one of their members received an opportunity to reach the big time. The band's guitarist Diamond Darrell, later known as Dimebag Darrell, received an opportunity to join then red-hot Megadeth. The band was desperately in need of a guitarist at the time, and they gave a call to Diamond Darrell. Darrell said he would only join the band if they took his brother Vinnie Paul at the same time. They were a package deal. But Megadeth had then already made a decision hiring Nick Menza as their drummer. So Darrell turned down the offer, but it was reportedly close to happening if they had accepted Vinnie Paul into the band. So Dave Mustaine instead made the decision to hire Marty Friedman. After a brief lull in the band focusing on this new opportunity, the brothers then shifted their focus back to Pantera. The Abbott brothers would face setback after setback, reportedly being turned down a whopping 28 times for a major record deal. In 1989, though, things would begin to turn around for the group. They met up with Concrete Management, and they helped them broker a deal with Atco Records. Side note, Concrete Management stayed with Pantera until they eventually broke up in 2003. The members of Pantera quickly began work on their major label debut at Pantago Studios. They would hire the great producer Terry Date to work on the album for them. It's reported that the members of Pantera were huge fans of his work on Overkill's album The Years of Decay. On July 24, 1990, Pantera would make their major label debut with the release of Cowboys from Hell. Many fans consider this to be the official debut of Pantera, discounting their first 4 albums, those independent records with a completely different style. And several members of Pantera have actually gone on record agreeing with that sentiment. The album would quickly reach critical acclaim for the band, and they were off to the races on their journey to superstardom. In September of 1991, they performed at one of the most legendary concert performances of all time. Dubbed Monsters in Moscow, featuring AC/DC and Metallica, also featuring Pantera, the band was reportedly able to perform for a crowd of over 500,000 crazy metalheads in Moscow, though some estimates place this number closer to 1 million fans. In the years that would follow, Pantera would go on to release Vulgar Display of Power and Far Beyond Driven between the years of 92 and 95. These albums would also become some of the most beloved metal records ever to be released by any band. Pantera was on a massive rise to superstardom, and it seemed like the train wasn't slowing down. But unfortunately, tensions began boiling underneath the surface around the time the band was working on The Great Southern Trendkill. The Abbott brothers, in various interviews, would describe erratic behavior around this time by vocalist Phil Anselmo. They said he would distance himself from the group when they went back on tour in '95. Initially, they felt this was because he had a difficult time dealing with his newfound fame, but it was later revealed by Anselmo that he was struggling with untreated back injuries from his grueling performances on stage.
Thank you, we're fucking REO Speedway.
This would eventually lead him to consult with doctors about a back surgery. The doctors felt confident that they could fix the issue, but it would lead to a lengthy recovery. Anselmo was unwilling to take a break from the band's grueling tour schedule, which would eventually lead him to begin abusing drugs further as a method to treat his pain. On July 13, 1996, shockwaves were sent through the metal community after it was revealed that vocalist Phil Anselmo had overdosed on heroin just 1 hour after a Texas performance with Pantera.
I think it shook everybody else up. I was in bliss, actually. I was gone. Don't remember anything. And when you come out of something like that and you wake up and you A, embarrassed. B, you see how it affects everybody around you. Just those two elements right there, there's no way that could ever happen again.
It's reported that Anselmo's heart stopped beating for a whopping 5 minutes, with paramedics giving Anselmo a shot of either adrenaline or Narcan, though reports of this are unclear. Anselmo would then apologize to his bandmates just the next night and promise to quit abusing drugs. Vinny and Dime were reportedly embarrassed and shocked by Anselmo's revelation. The band would continue touring in support of the album for several years, with treks on Ozfest and various other tours. Also, multiple members of the band were working on their own side projects. The group would enter the studio in 1999, working on their final studio record, Reinventing the Steel, which was subsequently released on March 21st, 2000. Reinventing the Steel would feature singles like Revolution Is My Name and Goddamn Electric, and the band would once again appear on the main stage of Ozfest. Following the release of this album, the band would be riddled with bad luck. The group had to cancel numerous US tour dates in 2000 due to Anselmo breaking 2 ribs in an accident in New Orleans. The band was also forced to cancel international tour dates as a result of the 9/11 attacks. Anselmo would use this opportunity to begin working on the second Down album. It's been reported that the Abbott brothers disliked Anselmo's propensity to be involved in numerous side projects, to include Down and, of course, Superjoint Ritual, among others. It's also reported that during this time, Anselmo had fallen back into his substance abuse issues, despite remaining largely sober during the recording sessions of Reinventing the Steel. Unfortunately, when it comes to the breakup of Pantera, there really aren't many good answers, other than the members of Pantera just stopped communicating with one another. Phil Anselmo was reportedly heavily involved with substance abuse issues at this time, and the Abbott brothers, despite their best efforts, were unable to talk to him. In an interview with Revolver, Vinnie Paul said, "There never was an official breakup of the band. It never officially broke up. When we finished the last tour that we did in 2001, we really didn't talk to each other for about a year. And then Phil's Superjoint thing was going full blast, and he gets this Down thing. He goes out on Ozfest, and people from the crowd are obviously going to yell Pantera. And he would make all these F Pantera speeches. That band is dead. We're like, where the F did this come from? News to me." That's really how the whole thing started. We tried to reach out to the dude. Dime reached out to the dude several times personally. After about a year and 8 months or whatever, me and Dime just said, "You know what? I guess we don't have a band anymore, man. We better get on starting something else if we want to keep rocking and rolling. I got all these cool new riffs." And that's how Damage Plan came about. Anselmo would share his side of the story in the same interview. "I remember hearing the news that they were going to start this band Damage Plan. I thought maybe it was this side thing. Never in my wildest dreams did I think Pantera was done for. I remember calling Vince and he kept expressing how upset Dimebag was at me. So I said, 'F man, I've got to call this guy.' Sure enough, he's a little aggravated with me and I ask him, 'Well, what's up with this Damage Plan thing?' And he said, 'Well, that's the direction we're headed, man.' So I said, 'Come on, man. Dude, we can keep Pantera going.' I guess he wasn't having any of it. Can't blame him. In hindsight, I totally understand where they were coming from. I get it, man." Speaking on his anti-Pantera rants on stage, "I regret the things I said," Anselmo proclaimed. "But dude, I could not even tell you what I said. I have no memory of the Superjoint days. It's all so vague. I was annihilated. I was consumed with pain. I was consumed with what comes with addiction. Methadone, heroin, Soma, Xanax, and this huge cocktail of pills. I was an animal, a wounded animal. I was striking out at anyone, and simply put, you know how they say you hurt the ones you love the most? It definitely applies. I hurt my entire family. I hurt my best friends. I hurt my band because I was hurting, and what you feel is what you put out. So that's the situation I was in. And yes, it's an effing regret. Had things not turned out the way they did for Pantera, Anselmo imagined a scenario where he and the Abbott brothers would have been able to smooth things over and carry on as Pantera. He said, "Not to get too into Fantasyland, but if Dimebag was still alive, believe me, I think that after my back surgery in 2005 and getting better all around, physically, mentally, it all goes hand in hand. I think that we would have reunited for sure and done many things, tour, new records, that whole thing. But I guess it's just not to be. I think there would have been at least some forgiveness, some understanding, and some healing. I really do." That's all for now. Don't forget to subscribe to Rockfeed with notifications on for more deep dives just like this one and breaking news and updates about your favorite rock musicians. Leave a comment below about a future deep dive you'd like to see.